Just a thing to say about how society claims that they are less barbaric than earlier societies. They think they're becoming less barbaric. Yet the murder rates climb, rape climbs, all the crimes climb. And what I think is the old farther you go back, the more peaceful, not necessarily society, but possibly villages, until you grew into a society where they tried to create rules, tried to change the way, one village grew too big and there were too many people. Maybe they were lazy and they wanted to take over other villages, and they later became a government, and possibly the first government, which tried to impose rules on other villages or tribes, and said, well, this is how we want it done, this is what you have to do. And then the rebellions and wars and crime increased because crime would have been created by a government who wouldn't want to do anything. They'd want other people doing it for them, and then they just collect the rewards, which is all the government does: collect the rewards off of other people's toil. And they've done nothing. All ideas come from the people. The government does nothing but implement ideas they've either stolen or were given. And and then they point the finger at another government. So all government basically covers the back of government, even in other countries. I mean, if you're communist or whatever, they're doing the same. They're all doing the same thing, and there's just a variance of control and power, and the way they how they tax. So I think the farther you go back through time, where people say, well, they were barbarians back then and we're lucky you live in nowadays. Maybe barbarian as far as there's no heat and air conditioning. You have a better shelter. You're more sheltered from storms and weather, and the food might be more abundant. You wouldn't have to migrate, but they might have been, even though they died young, they were probably a healthier individuals, probably happier individuals, and probably the only thing that caused uh, crime is the growth of things caused by other tribes that had already grown in size, and then started taking over these smaller tribes that never had conflict with anybody else, so they wouldn't fight against this larger tribe. And if they did, then they probably would have been genocided. So government basically genocided villages until they got to the point to where they want what they want. And nowadays, genocide is illegal in government unless there's a war going on, which they always attack. I mean, I you know I'm a flag waver. Well, I don't wave flags, but I mean, I'm as patriotic until it comes to the point where it's just stupidity. I'm not gonna be a patriot for stupidity, as in, we just go against a smaller country, and we can take this over because we got all this technology, and then we end up there 10, 15 years not being able to do anything against people with bows, arrows, and bolt action rifles. With a massive amount of people that'll die for their freedom. That we Anyway, I'm not gonna get into the baloney that has evolved over governmental rule over time through history, which is, oh, we're peaceful now. Well, we probably were peaceful in the beginning, and then government moving in to take over villages, possibly sending criminals to take away, uh, maybe destroy crops, destroy resources, so that they would be dependent on this larger city, so that this larger city could just, like cities nowadays, they want more taxes. They just, like this area that I live in, it was, what do they take it when it's absorbed by the city? And this used to be rural. In other words, where I'm at, this used to be like small farms. Before that, it was like a large area. I looked through my abstract, the history of it, and it was a large area and then sold off for this, that, and the other. And it was, I don't know, it was basically undeveloped. I don't know if they had 1800s, there was those large farms or something that was in this area, but I think they just sold off. They just, rich people moved in, and anyway, but annexed. And that's what I was getting to. They annexed this area, and so that's basically what small tribes did. They grew, and then their power, somehow through greed, they became predatorial. Uh, and took over other small tribes that were less than them, who were undefended of their territory. They were just peaceful people that probably traded. And that's why you see a lot of this prehistoric stuff that, wow, this came from thousands of miles away. Well, they're probably peaceful. They probably traded seeds. They probably, if they had plants that they traded, they probably traded food and art and everything else. Here, take this. Oh, we got something for you. Here's something that our tribe is known for, or, that we're knowledgeable in. There wasn't wars, there wasn't crime. They just traded, and they still try to do that today. But it's backstabbing and everything else. It will give you this, but it's a junk metal. You got to get microscopic with everything. I mean, if you want to do anything nowadays, everything is so convoluted that you have to have a degree in everything you do. If you want to buy a toaster, you have to know. You'd have to actually know the people who design. You'd have to go if you want to buy a freaking toaster. You'd have to know all the schematics and where all the components come from, and you'd have to know if the companies making the components are respectable or are just in it to delve out a large supply because we got a government contract, or we got a big industrial contract. We were a small time component maker, but now we make components for these large things, and we got to do it on a large basis. They basically weren't built up, and then it might take them decades to build up to a point like Japan. Japan used to be, back in the 60s, they weren't anything anybody wanted. They were cheaper than American made products, but they weren't dependable. And then all of a sudden, Honda bust into the market. They thought, well, and they started doing R&D, and then they developed their stuff. And, they're being the Asians are basically disciplined. I mean, as far as America's freedom has basically made us almost an undisciplined public or society. Whereas all these other societies, they have, even though I don't know if it's our government makes them more disciplined, or it possibly could be government, or just maybe they thought this is how we have to be, and so they were disciplined enough to surpass in respectability of building a more reliable vehicle, and that forced that just blew the minds of all the American manufacturers who possibly had a better steel, but then they're this, that, and the other, they weren't really devoted to making better. I mean, look at the Ford Ranger. Those things, they made those, and the framework, they just rusted. Back ends, rear ends were falling off of them, and they were just rust buckets, and they were junk. And they anyway, I'm just saying, I think society has evolved into it used to be peaceful, and they're trying to say, well, we're evolving into we were better. Or not we, me, or whoever, but the people before, because I'm not gonna attach myself to say we, as in I am a part of them, because over time you go back 300 years and you probably would not get along with your lineage. You'd probably say, well, I'm not, this is stupid, this is, it might have been more disciplined than you are now, or done something now that you should do, but you're not going to, you back, if you would have met them back then, if the attitude you have now, you would have been, what would you have been if you had the attitude you have now back 200 years ago, 300 years ago? You probably would have been thrown out. You probably would have, who knows what would have happened to you. But the attitude now would not have survived, and where it grew from, I'm going to have to start thinking about that. Where did this attitude of what society has grown into now, even different societies. I mean, Warren societies and all that. But I think we're more peaceful, not necessarily in hominids, but even Neolithic, though they were hunting. I'm sure by the time they were hunting and they'd met, that would have been Neolithic. They probably would have had there probably would have been trouble within Neolithic tribes. But I'm saying like before Neolithic, before a government structure or even not a village would have a village. I don't know, villages, tribes are still going to be headed by somebody. Possibly before there was a set of tribes where it was just people giving ideas, and then what came about to create a leader or guards or whatever that, the guards were created because they finally figured out that another tribe was stealing their stuff, and how that tribe evolved into stealing other people's stuff is, it's a leadership. People not wanting to do their part, and they thought, well, it's easier to just do this. Like China's stealing all their, they don't want to build their own cars because if you looked at any of these Japanese, let's say the Japanese has reliable cars through Acura and stuff like that, or Lexus or whatever. I don't know how they are anymore, but the respectability they built up. They didn't have that back in the 60s. In the 60s, you thought anything Asian, Hong Kong, or any of that stuff was junk. And right now, I'm back to everything being junk. Now, I don't know what Hong Kong's, they might put out some stuff, of their own. I don't know. I'm still stuck with the mindset, except for, like Honda and Acura and stuff like that, being a quality made product compared to American made. There's, you don't know what they build. I think they've cut themselves too thin. They build too many products where they should just build, a compact, mid-size, and a luxury. If they concentrated on that and put all their effort into those three things, in a pickup. In a pickup, you could have a 3/4 ton frame and just have them all made the same, and then just change the suspension systems on them. That way, that would cut down on so much. People say, "Oh, you got to put this much. You got to put a 1/32 more of metal in this framework, and which would cost us over 20 years $1 billion of putting that." Yeah, well, and then the quality, the quality, we need it to rust, so they buy every, they probably got a agenda of making people buy a new product every, what is it, 5 years? I paid $1,200 for a refrigerator about 17 years ago, and I expected it to, my grandmother's refrigerators, they lasted for it was like an old Frigidaire or something. It was like it had a pull handle on it and everything else, and it lasted for a long time until she upgraded, I don't know, in the mid 70s or something like that, to a new one, because they just finally they didn't have the componentry to fix it anymore. And the new one, I don't even know how long it lasted. I don't think it lasted near as long as that other one. Now, they might be more efficient, but all these components are coming from China. I almost had my house burned down twice because of the freaking componentry from Chinese componentry in my refrigerator. Now, I thought, what? I wonder if China's building stuff to burn people. They're trying to destroy America. And now, with the pandemic happening, I'm thinking, well, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm right. I think they built this junk componentry is because I wonder if they build their own. I wonder if their own componentry to their own manufacturers that they sell to their own country is better. I wonder if they have the same problems in China with their componentry as they send out to everybody else. It's kind of like, I don't know if it was back in the 60s or whenever it was, where I heard about that fruit growers, there was certain types of, you see an orange back in the 60s, they didn't have all the fruit in the markets they have nowadays. You go there and you see all this stuff. They used to have maybe apples, oranges, and bananas. And bananas, they were advertising bananas back in the 60s. It was a big thing. It was like, wow, bananas. And they were, my mom wouldn't buy them. Now they're cheap. But back in the 60s, it was hard to, get my mom, hey, mom, can we have some bananas for us? No, they cost too much. They want so much for them. And then they do this and that and they, whatever. So we didn't get bananas. Basically, apples. A lot, one or two times. I think it was like Red Delicious is about all there was. Red and green. Red apples and green apples. They didn't have all the, Honey Crisp and all they have nowadays. All this stuff is over, 60 years has developed. And, and they grow them on a rootstock, which is only supposed to last. They're made for quick growth, so these people that have a loss of trees in a orchard can get a quick growth out of these rootstocks instead of growing from. It takes. You could possibly have new fruit on a rootstock apple tree within, they say, I don't know what, or peach tree or something like that, in 7 years. Whereas if you grow, say, grow something from just the seed, it takes possibly 20 to 25. It takes 20 years to get fruit or nut from something that you don't. And that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason for rootstock. And they try to say, well, you have to have two trees or something like that to get a fruit set or a nut set. Now I've heard that the pecans need two different types of pecans in the area to crossbreed with. I don't know if they both have to flower at the same. They don't both have to flower at the same time, but they have to be a different kind of. I don't know what it is, but pecans I've heard that you need two. But everything else they say you need two trees, and in reality, like a peach tree or something like that, you only need one. You only need one because one flower. If you have two flowers on the tree, one's going to pollinate the other flower. One flower on the one tree is going to pollinate the other flower on the same tree, and that's where you get your fruit from. But they say, well, you need two to fruit, and it's not true. You need two flowers, but you don't need two trees. And they're selling. They just do all that. They just lie to you for freaking profit, and this is getting ridiculous. And that's the problem with society. Nobody can trust anybody, and that just increases crime, which increases government control, which decreases the freedom of people and the security and everything else. And they make more laws which protect more criminals, and that's why criminal rates go up, because they have more criminals get by with more stuff. I mean, how hard is it to convict somebody of crime? Somebody could be doing crime for 20 years, get caught for the first time, and they're going up for a first offense. Now, they could have been, stealing or whatever for 20 years, be a highly known criminal in the circles of crime, and they go up in court one time, the first time they get caught, and if since it's their first offense, their first time they've ever been arrested, their first offense, they could have been doing it for 20 years, and they're going to be treated like a virgin. Like, he didn't know he was stealing. He was just happened to be there, and he could have scouted it out. He could have put people in place, maybe whatever kind of scam or thievery or whatever. They could have had a whole network of people to commit these crimes and to put forward these crimes. But anyway, I'm just saying, society is just the more they tell you how safe it is, the more you should just know it's unsafe. Who do you trust anymore? I mean, look at people. These neighbors around here. Nobody talks to neighbors anymore. Used to be, you could talk to well, of course, when I was growing up, none of the adults, all the kids talked, and of course there was kids that had the news of everybody, and not all of it was true, but they would spread it anyway. And but when I was little, on this neighborhood we moved to when I was like, I don't know, 5 years old. But after a while, each year we had lived on a dead end street. We'd have a block party, We'd go out. Everybody would bring stuff. They'd have a fire built, and everybody gather up, and it was like an all day thing, and then people stay up till night, and everybody eat food and they talk, and it's just something we did every year. And I don't know if it brought the neighbors, it just made a more peaceful neighborhood. But now, I don't even know the names of my neighbors, because you talk to them, and they, it's just, I don't know. It's like they're hiding. It's like they're trying to hide something. I'd go out, and I'd have a bunch of. I had some basil a few years when I first moved here. Had some basil. I just had a bush, like almost a hedge of basil, and I was taking it around, and people. There's some people that loved it. In fact, there's, oh man, talk about weird. A lot of people up and down the street, they take it, and some people, no, we don't use that. We don't use basil. And I was like, wow, this, because when I grew up here, the South Side, it was like there was a lot of I don't know if there was a lot of Italians on the South Side here. It was Italians, and but now it's since I moved back, it's a lot of Hispanic and black, and for some reason, it's everything here around here is just Mexican restaurant, and that's what that's that, and closed down stores. But that's what it is nowadays. I'm from this side of town, so that's why I moved back here. But there's no gardens anymore. You look around, because you used to look in the backyard, and there would be people gardening. But anyway, it's just society. It's just turned against. It's not a secure. I mean, it's, what is it? Eisenhower spoke up and said spoke against the government, saying the militarized, or whatever he said about the militarized government. I don't know. I think we was more peaceful before government. I think government is ruining everything, and all these people pushing to be in control is ruining it. Pushing to be in control. They spend millions and millions of dollars. George Washington, I don't think he spent any money on politicking. In fact, he had other people do his politicking, and they just came up to him and said, "Hey, you're president." I mean, there's more to it than that, but I mean, it's basically how it happened. Same with Eisenhower. He said, I'm not going to run for president. You want to vote me in, you vote me in. And he became president. That's how he became president. He wasn't out spending millions and millions of dollars. Well, he raised $200 million to become president. Who wants somebody who just had more money? I want somebody, I don't even want anybody. I don't think we need government. I think we got internet, and we don't need government. But of course, as everything, there's conspiracy, and people that are going to corrupt. And, I mean, look at all the false information you get on the internet. So if it's on the internet, it's through the mouths of whoever, especially politicians. Look at all the stuff you got politicians now. Anyway, that's enough on this subject. I'm just saying that I think society, or people, humanity, not necessarily because they're not necessarily meaning they were humane, because they killed animals back in the day, but I'm thinking that they were more peaceful toward each other. What I'm trying to say is, the wilder we were as animals, the wilder an animal is, the more tame it is. I think humans used to be able to walk probably through herds of animals without bothering them. As said, nowadays you come across a herd of deer, boom, they're gone. They see a human, boom, they're gone. But back in the wild, when humans were just wild, I don't mean wild running around crazy. I mean, not necessarily migratory, but not necessarily having a home. They might have been wandering. They might have been migratory for food, or if they're whatever it was. But they didn't have a home. They weren't just out killing everything. Maybe we're in the gathering stages instead of the hunting stages. That they were probably able to walk through animals. Just herds of maybe whatever. And as they started hunting them, then animals became more aware that animals that were being hunted became more aware. But a wild animal that had never been hunted before would still possibly allow you to walk around them if they've never been hunted before. And that's what I'm thinking. Humans, they are like animals. Back when they were wilder, they were tamer. They weren't as crazy as they are nowadays. If you can't walk through herd of people, unless you're in like a downtown setting. If you walk through a herd of people, say of whatever, if you walk through, if you were different than whatever it is, whether it's be how you dress or whatever, how you look or whatever. If you were different than what you walk through people now, and they were just those people and you probably have a chance of being confronted instead of just being able to walk by them or whatever. I just think when we were wilder, we were better. They keep claiming, who's pushing that government and society being more concentrated into areas makes us a better people. I don't think it does. I think the more concentrated it is, it creates more problems. And I think that's where all these mental problems are coming from, is people are maybe they were born to be wild, like the song says. And it's, we've grown into a society where the people that are born to be wild and free are living in this, and all the interactions and stuff, they're not, their mind is more calm, and they have to deal with, when you're in like a stressful environment, it's going to make you more radical. And that's where maybe all this ADHD comes from. That maybe these people should be living in the country instead of living in the city. They ADHD, so they're all, getting panged around like an electron. Maybe it goes back to maybe it is a atomic structure, biological structure of some sort, that different elements are more crazy than others. So we'll probably never know, because science won't ever say that. They'll direct it toward whatever, religion will direct it toward. They all direct it towards someplace. It keeps them in power. It's going to direct it to wherever they've already got an agenda for you to believe what they say, and take wherever their finger points, who to blame. So I'm thinking when we were wilder, we were tamer, calmer, and less criminalistic. Unlike what, everybody tells you, that it's better nowadays than it used to be. I think that's only environmentally, as far as being able to escape the environment, the hostilities of winters and heat. And, there's people that live in societies that, or villages or tribes that, like what are they, Bushmen of like Africa and stuff. I don't know, are there murders and crimes in bush tribes? I don't know. Possibly from them going and visiting a city and running around with people and other people and learning this, that, and the other. Then they take it back to the tribe and they do it to the tribe. And the tribe is like conflicted as well. What's going on here? Why are we being right? And then that's where it grows. Is you meet somebody bigger,